Good evening. Welcome to the Federal webinar, the seventh in the ongoing series. This evening, we are going to discuss what it means to be non-vegetarian in today's India. Well, let me just explain the topic itself a little bit. You may notice the usage of the word non-vegetarian. Language purists point out that the word meat eaters would have been more appropriate. But this is a neutral word used internationally. In the Indian context, non-veg or non-vegetarian has several connotations specific to this country, and the topic goes with that. Similarly, the expression today's India in the topic is crucial because as the issue of what one eats has rarely ever dominated political discourse as now, especially since the advent of the NDA government in 2014. If you go back into what's happened since, first was this harsh ban on all kinds of cattle slaughter in many BJP ruled states. And then, there have been restrictions on the sale of meat on certain days of the week in places like Gurugram. And then in many places, the sale of meat is now restricted during extended festivals like, say, Dasra. And then, in a kind of a related thing, for eggs, for instance, were withdrawn from the menu of the midday meal scheme for children in some states. And of course, the latest is the targeting of street food vendors selling meat in parts of Gujarat, allegedly for hurting vegetarian sentiments. And we don't know where all this is leading to and what to make of it. So it's an issue that is close to everybody. At the same time, it also lot of people, and it also opens up a whole variety of reactions. So we thought we must discuss this, and for that we have today an accomplished and an eclectic panel to figure out and see what they make of it. For instance, we have Dr. Sylvia Karpagam. She's a public health doctor and researcher working on the social determinants of health. She recently undertook a detailed study on the impact of cattle slaughter in Karnataka. And then you have Sohail Hashmi, who's a writer, filmmaker, and exponent of culture. He has several documentary films to his credit, among which he's attempting to also understand various cultures through their food habits and their cuisine. And then you have Meet Asha, who's an animal rights advocate and associate manager of the response team at Mumbai's PETA, People's Ethical Treatment for Animals. And then Anundya Chakravarti is a senior journalist with definite views and involvement in the topic under discussion today. In fact, I would ask Anundya to set the ball rolling, with what he has to say. Before he starts, I would like to tell all the panelists that they have about 5 minutes each to make an opening comment, and then we'll throw it open for discussions. And then at the same time, I also would request all the viewers to send in their questions, and we will take them up towards the later half of the program. So Anundya, it's all yours.
Okay. I think I should be audible now. Thank you so much for getting me here. And I feel like a bit of an interloper in this August company, because I think the only reason I was asked to come here is because I had tweeted about vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism, and there was a lot of response on that. So maybe I am, in a sense, the average voice here and not the expert voice at all. I see a lot of experts here. So I think that one has to distinguish between eating vegetables, a higher degree of vegetables, reducing meat consumption, and vegetarianism. These are two different things. The first thing is that let's just look at the kind of impact that large-scale cattle rearing for meat eating has on climate change. It is quite a lot. Right? Even in terms of malnutrition in the world, 30% of grain that is produced is actually eaten by cattle, which is then slaughtered for cattle or animals which are reared for meat eating, and it's then slaughtered for eating by human beings. So on the one hand, we have a significant amount of starvation in the world, but on the other hand, we have this kind of thing. However, there's a distinction to be made. If I look at something like the USA, for instance, right? In the USA, on an average, about an American eats about 130 kilos every year of meat and fish. Okay, and if I take the average body weight of an American, and here I'm not distinguishing between male and female, then it's approximately 85 kilos. And nowadays, it's said that you need to have about 0.8 grams of protein per kilo body weight. So let's say on an average, they need to have about 65 to 70 grams of protein every day, an American citizen. What they are getting only from animal protein is 125 grams. Right? So almost double just from animal meat protein. And to that, you can add other things like eggs, milk, and grain and vegetables and stuff like that. And you get a huge amount of protein. Think of what we get in India on the other. In India, the per capita consumption of meat is 4.5 kilos per year. 4.5 kilos per year. So therefore, in India, eating meat is actually, we need to increase it rather than reduce it. Because again, let's say the standard argument is that you don't need to eat meat to get proteins. There are many nutritionists who will say that is not true. Some will say that is true. And I'm going to leave that to Dr. Karpagam, because she's the expert here. But if I just look at on an average, what are the main sources of protein? There would be milk, there will be pulses, because soybean is not that popular in India. Right? On an average, the per capita consumption of pulses in India per day is 48 grams. Now, if you include it, boil it, you have that 48 grams will work out to about 75 odd grams. And that leaves you with just about 7 grams of protein. If you look at pulses itself, just 7 grams of protein. Animal protein, on the other hand, is very low consumption, but it is actually eaten by the poor. We have surveys done, for instance, the IDHS survey, which shows that essentially poorer people in India eat animal protein because have often eaten buffalo or beef because of this providing a very cheap source of nutrition and protein for them. So when we impose certain vegetarianism, which is supposedly Indian, but we know that actually vegetarianism is a high level of vegetarianism is only 4 or 5 states in India, which is Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat, right? These are the key states where there's a high level of vegetarianism, and parts of UP. But other than that, vegetarianism or just eating vegetables is not prevalent anywhere. So the NSSO studies show 70% of Indians are meat eaters, right? Only 30% are meat avoiders. And if we look at the division in terms of social group, then the highest is actually in Jains. Second, after that, you have Sikhs who eat a lot of vegetables. And then there is upper caste Brahmins, or 70%. Other than that, every other group has less amount of vegetarians than non-vegetarians. So that's 5 minutes. I'm going to stop here.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So what you're basically saying is that though the per capita consumption is low, it's spread across. So which means that everybody, the people who eat, but then not to the extent that probably they would eat in the West. So in that case, is it like a storm in a teacup? I mean, would you look at it that way?
As I said, that I think that we need to increase animal protein consumption amongst people who eat animal proteins. Because the only other sources which can provide that kind of protein, and India is a protein malnutrition country, is, let's say, soybean. And I am a father of a child who has soy allergies and intolerance. And therefore, we have, as a family, done a lot of study into soy and what causes soybean allergies and intolerances. And I was surprised to see how many people in the world actually suffer from soy-related problems. And there is an argument that soy is pushed by big agriculture companies and also by the food industry, which uses soy because it's cheap, soybean oil and meat extended. So we need to have people who eat meat have to be allowed to eat meat in India. People who eat meat in the West have to reduce their consumption. They can easily reduce it to 1/3 and still have a very good diet. So I think these two distinctions have to be maintained.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Karpagam, you are opening.
Yeah, thank you. So in my 5 minutes, what I want to flag is that in India, first of all, we have a very serious nutritional crisis. And recently we've had the National Family Health Survey, that is a 2019-20 report, and that is even before the pandemic and before people lost their jobs in huge numbers and before all the social security schemes like the midday meals, the public distribution system, the ICDS, all of that has shut down in the last 1.5 years. So even before that, we had like very dire nutritional indicators. So for example, children under 6 months who've been exclusively breastfed are only about 64%. And that is, again, a whole lot of social factors which prevent a mother from, breastfeeding her child. It's the economic reasons, it's the social reasons, the fact that the women do not get the maternity, benefits. A lot of them are in the informal sector. And children who have received an adequate diet is only around 11 to 12%. And we have stunting of almost about 35.5%. That means children are not reaching the heights that they're expected to reach for their age. We have an underweight of almost 32%, which means children are not reaching the weights that they're expected to reach. And these have huge consequences. They have consequences on the child, and they also have consequences on the economy of the country. You have people who are smaller, and because of stunting, they also have other nutritional deficiencies. So basically, they grow up into unhealthy adults. And in fact, non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, heart diseases are all associated with this kind of malnutrition in a very early age. And again, you have women with body mass index less than 18.5 of almost 18 to, and in men almost 16%. And this means that this is almost a starvation diet. And what it means is that people are chronically hungry, and this again affects their overall, I think I don't have to explain the impact of people being, on a starvation diet, and it's a huge number. And a lot of people think that, the women are more undernourished, men are mostly well nourished, but they're mostly in a comparable range of almost 16 to 17%. And if you look at anemia, even before the child reaches 5 years, we have a 67% anemia prevalence in the country. And women age 15 to 49, it's almost 57%. Now, what this means is, and this is more in the Dalit and Adivasi communities. And if you look at children who are anemic, if they're going to school with anemia and there's also hunger, these children are not going to be able to concentrate in school, and they labeled early as poor learners. And in the kind of caste context, you can imagine, in terms of the consequences, the huge consequences can have on the child. And the women, everyone don't get pregnant, but if they do, again, the anemia contributes quite significantly to postpartum hemorrhage, and that contributes to maternal mortality and is the single largest preventable cause of maternal deaths in the country. Now, if you look at the way nutrition is happening in India, so you have two ends of the spectrum. You have people, communities who have traditionally eaten certain foods, especially the marginalized communities. They're used to eating different forms of animal source foods, and especially organ meats, which are cheaper, and like beef or poultry or eggs, dry fish or fish. And these have been very good sources of nutrient dense foods for a large segment of the population. If you look at the research also, what research says is that we have different food groups. So you have cereals, millets, and you have pulses, legumes, and then you have the animal source foods. And I think the research says that there needs to be diversity. There needs to be different food groups in the diet. It cannot be only, cereal or millet centric. And what is the problem in the country is the entire group that comes in the middle. So you have people who are interpreting this research. You have people who are converting this research into policy or decisions. And they are the ones who bring in a whole caste and corporate nexus into this. For example, you'll have people promoting only cereals because they say it's cheap. You'll have doctors saying, don't eat animal source foods, or you have researchers bringing out a whole bunch of research which is prejudiced. And nutritional research, the possibility of prejudice and bias is very high, right from the way you design the study to the way you interpret the results. And we don't factor that in. And it's important to understand, like the previous speaker said, that it's the poor who eat animal source foods. But actually, milk and dairy is an animal source food. It doesn't come from a plant. It doesn't come from a tree. It is the composition wise, in terms of protein, in terms of minerals, in terms of vitamins, it is an animal source food, comes from an animal. And so that explains why people who identify as vegetarians, but who because of their caste location have a better, economic, economically better, socially better, in terms of decision making, in terms of access. They have better outcomes because even if they don't eat the meat or eggs or fish, they still have access to dairy, which is largely inaccessible to the poorer communities. And the other thing I want to say is that when we talk about climate, we usually ignore the contribution of the huge polluters like the automobiles and the industries. And then we bring in the discussion on livestock. Again, the discussion is prejudiced in the sense we need to look at the life cycle of methane. We need to look at carbon dioxide. We need to look at the carbon sinks. What is the life of, like, say, for example, methane, it exists in the atmosphere for about 10 years, and then it gets absorbed. Unlike the other fossil fuel, emissions, which are there permanently in the atmosphere. There's the other also the factor of, like, you're concerned about animals. The problem sometimes is people view animals differently. Like we have, like you said, we've done a study with the farmers, and we've done a study with people who've been affected by the cattle slaughter ban. And the farmers say, who are you to decide how we love our animals? We have these animals because they're an important part of a livelihood. We love them, we revere them, and we also sell them. We sell them. If they are productive, we sell them to other farmers. But if they are not productive, we sell them as meat. So who are you to decide to come and suddenly say, okay, you stop selling the animals and you take care of them? It means, you have to demonstrate your love for the animals. So I think that's also an important aspect. And the other point I want to make is that there is a caste and corporate nexus in how they're designing our food. So we have the global agenda. We also have the local, the national agenda. I think that is what is, the contributing the severe nutritional crisis in the country.
Okay, we'll come back to that, Karpagam, as we talk about this corporate nexus. Maybe we can discuss a little more on that. Meet Asha. So your opening remark.
Yes, thank you for having me, first of all. What I would like to say about this issue is that thanks to the power of social media and awareness campaigns that have been going on about this issue, that there has been a tremendous rise in the number of people who have switched to a vegan lifestyle across the globe. And this is one which means what is a vegan lifestyle is one where there are no animal-derived products, which means no animals are used or harmed in the making of those products. Growing number of people in India and worldwide are going vegan for their own health and for the health of the planet. There are many vegans in every religion, and being vegan does not mean that you belong to a particular community. It's a global concept without any religious boundaries. Dietary vegans are basically vegetarians who refrain from consuming milk and any other animal-derived foods like honey, etc. Between 2004 and 14, there was a 5% growth in the number of vegetarians in India. And a recent article on a website run by Franchise India Holdings Limited, which is Asia's largest integrated franchise solution company, states that the number of vegans in India has risen by 360% in the past decade. And the trend is global. 70% of the world population is eliminating or reducing its meat consumption. This movement is basically driven by largely by millennials who care about issues such as animal protection and the effect of food production on the environment and climate change. Now, as an organization, as PETA India opposes speciesism. What is speciesism? I'll just try and explain that. Like racism and sexism, speciesism is an unfair bias against those who are different from us, in this case, animals. Speciesism is also arbitrary ranking of how much moral concern we should have for different species of animals. For instance, considering a dog as a friend and a chicken as food is speciesed, because both of these animals want to live and do not want to suffer. Animals are not ours to put in the middle of politics or religious debate. They are thinking, feeling beings who do not want to die. Knowing what we know about animals' ability to pain and suffer and their intelligence, it becomes a moral duty to not cause them harm. And if we do not go vegan, we all will die. We will die from climate change, we will die from heart disease, or we will die from another COVID-like disease. Using animals as pawn for human conflict is not right, and neither is any form of violence. We seek a kinder, more peaceful society for all, and we can achieve that by ensuring everyone's right, whether animal or human, to live free from suffering.
Okay, thank you, Pete. I will come back to this. You just made a opening thing. We'll get back into, because we are also discussing the politics of it. It's not, I mean, what you're saying is, of course, very valid and, in its own right. But yeah, we'll come back to that, Meet. Mr. Sohail Ashmi, your turn now. I think you are on mute, Mr. Ashmi. I think you're on mute again, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you now. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Now, you see, the topic was what it means to be a non-vegetarian in India today.
Yes.
Now, first of all, taking off from where Anandya had started, I object to the term non-vegetarian. There are vegetarians and there are omnivores. There is nobody who just eats meat, except for some fanatics who want to present certain communities as people who do nothing but kill animals and eat meat. This kind of human beings don't exist in India. If you were only eating meat, very soon you will develop all kinds of ailments. So all those who eat meat also consume large quantities of vegetables. But what it means to be identified as a meat eater in India is something that is changing very drastically. And entire populations are being marked out and being attacked. People are being lynched for allegedly keeping meat in their fridge. And all this is being done in the name of love for nature, love for culture, love for heritage. And this is in total and absolute denial of the reality. Anandya was just mentioning a lot of figures, and which is broadly very correct. But I have had occasion to interact with a group of young people in Gujarat, and I was talking to them about food, and they said Gujaratis are vegetarians. These were young people based in based out of Ahmedabad and Baroda and all that. So then I took them on a tour district by district of Gujarat. And I said, look at the entire coastal population. What do they live on? All the tribals. And there is a substantive tribal population in Gujarat. All the Dalits. And they're not a small, the scheduled castes. They're not a small percentage in Gujarat. Then the Muslims, the Parsis, the Christians, and among the Kshatriyas, the former ruling elite that provided all the Rajas and all that. All of them are meat eaters. The only non-meat eaters in Gujarat are the Jains, the Brahmins, and some other small communities. Gujarat, like every other state in this country, is overwhelmingly non-vegetarian. How much meat they have to eat is a different issue, which is, Ananddev has absolutely rightly pointed out, that per capita consumption of meat is very low in India. The question of cattle, the way cattle is fed in the West is a totally different ball game than the way cattle is fed in this country. Our cattle is fed on grass and agricultural waste, twigs and hay and so on and so forth. They don't get to eat any grain. So they are also not contributing to the kind of methane and so on and so forth of the scale in which it happens in the US. Neither are they big drain. But all these are issues which are connected to dietary habits and so on and so forth. The issue that is confronting us today is an issue of democracy. Who in the hell has given you the right to tell me what I'm going to eat? What language I'm going to speak in? What dress I'm going to wear? What kind of music I want to listen to? What kind of films I want to see? All this is being decided by us. And all this for us, all in the name of culture, tradition, values, Indianness. And this is all essentially anti-democratic. It is actually fascist. We are being told you cannot eat this. You cannot see this kind of cinema. You cannot read these kind of books. And if you do that, you are, you are anti-national. So being a vegetarian is now being nationalist. And that is the actual danger. Individually, you might prefer vegan food, but you have no business to tell me that I have to become vegan. That is my democratic choice. I am not asking you to stop being vegan and start eating meat. You let me be, I let you be. But to be a vegetarian, why should I be a vegetarian? So I think the final question is that this is a question of whether we will allow people their democratic rights, their individual freedoms, or we are going to steamroller over everybody else. That is what I have to say.
Mr. Hashmi, one thing that comes across is that there seems to be no kind of there's nothing to stymie or to stall these kind of moves, which are made. For instance, what we saw in Gujarat about the targeting of, the street food vendors. How does it work? Is there something that's lacking in our rules or in our law or legislation that doesn't give them protection? How is it being done so easily?
No, I don't really, does the present dispensation in many of our states and at the center, do they actually bother? Are they bothered about what is permitted to every citizen as their individual rights given to them by the Constitution. And, we have received complaints against eggs being sold in the city. Those who are complaining, they never appear. Some mayor says, I have received complaint that people are unhappy about eggs being sold, so no eggs will be sold. When I complain about continuous bhajans on loudspeakers for 10 days and endlessly, while exams are going on, they are not stopped. But one fellow goes and says, these fellows offering namaz on the road, and the entire administration moves in. So it's not a question of whether you are following the, that are there democratic norms being followed. No democratic norms are being followed. It is just a bunch of goons who decide what you're going to eat. And then the entire administration, runs and kowtows to them. So I don't think that these people are worried about the niceties of the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, so now we have a really wide-ranging set of. So just before we go ahead with it, I would take this opportunity to present our 8th column, and then as a promo, and then we'll continue. It's a short break for a few seconds. Thank you for the the 8th column is something that where we do stories which generally you don't get to see in other websites. So please take a look. And this is for all the viewers. It's we just have to pay 1 rupee per day to access it. So coming back to our topic, so what we basically see here is that this particular issue, I find that it has a wide-ranging way of looking at it. For instance, Mr. Meat Usher is talking about what a vegan meal is, and the impact of meat eating in the globe. And then Mr. Ashmi is talking about the politics of it. Really the question is, so where do we stand as far as Mr. Meat Asha, for instance, how do we, for instance, if you would like people to turn vegetarian or to go vegan, not you, I mean you, I don't mean you, but I'm saying if anyone wants a non-vegetarian person to turn a vegan or a vegetarian, what would be the best way to go about it? You think this kind of intimidation would help, or is it this kind of intimidation that you see, in present times, in many different ways as we delineated? Would that be a good way to go about it? I mean, just thought, how do you view it?
Not at all. Rather, in my opening statement also, I did mention that, violence or any sort of, something which is non-violent or which is unkind towards anybody is not the way to proceed with this. And, nobody is forcing anybody to go vegan. Like one of the panelists said, I'm only making an appeal, meaning, That's all I or PETA as an organization or other groups or other people who are pro-vegan, they can only make an appeal to people. We cannot force anybody to go vegan. We don't make the law. We don't have any role directly in the policies that are made by the government, but we can only appeal to people and appeal to the government on the basis of certain researches and other things. More importantly, more than the research, I understand this is a political debate, but uh, what I feel and what PETA feels is that animals don't know politics. Like animals don't have a religion, animals also don't know politics. Nobody asks animals if they want to be killed, meaning whatever everybody says, they may be right in their own way. But my concern, and I'm going to be the voice of animals today because they don't have a voice to speak, to say anything. Meaning you can't say that, okay, because an animal is being legally slaughtered in a licensed and registered slaughterhouse, it's humane. It's not humane because no animal wants to die. If you try and use a knife to kill an animal, the animal will try and run away, not be not just lie down and say, okay, kill me. So that's the point that I would like to make. While this is a political debate, animals don't know politics, they don't know religion. We are dragging them in the middle of this for no fault of theirs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but but then the point here is that something else is, sorry.
Just one, the second point that you brought up about, what would be the way to go about it. For example, in today's day and age, leather is being made out of pineapples also, out of remnants of flowers that are offered, in temples, etc. And there is soya bean, like, some people may be allergic to soya bean, but there are other protein options, like there are chickpeas, there are peanuts, there are other legumes and pulses which one can consume for a whole plant-based diet. There's also something called tofu, which is very, very economical, which is equivalent to a paneer, but with more protein than paneer has. And like you get a packet of tofu of 200 grams for 40 rupees, but you don't get a 200-gram paneer block for 40 rupees. So even if you talk about, like, because there is this thing of some people saying that veganism is expensive or it's very exotic or things like that, it is not. Indian food is predominantly vegan unless you add dairy or meat in it. Like a South Indian who would eat idli, dosa, etc., is by default vegan unless you add butter or ghee in the dosa. How does the government go about it? By encouraging and providing subsidies, like how it was discussed in several conferences, that if you want people to switch to renewable sources of energy, you have to give them, the benefits, whether in terms of, discount or the government covering certain part of the cost, etc. Similarly, if vegan production in the country has to be increased, the government has to give certain subsidies, or if not subsidies, promote it in a manner that will be economically beneficial to the producer as well.
So, Dr. Karpagam, how would you react to what Mr. Meet Asher is saying, since you are in this area of nutrition and also done a lot of work on the ground?
So first of all, I think it's like a lot of people say that we don't force or we don't impose either veganism or vegetarianism. But I think one has to look at it beyond what an individual does to what is the larger, like, global or national push. And in terms of veganism, we have a huge, I would call it a mafia, which is a global mafia. And they have, in fact, populated the UN, Food System Summit itself, and they have the Eat Lancet Commission, which is comprised predominantly of vegans who actually wanted to bring a planetary health diet. So basically, they wanted to prescribe what the entire world should eat. And in fact, when they came to India, they were hosted by the Food Safety Standards Authority of India. So it was a government sanctioned event. And they actually said extremely problematic things. Firstly, they said India is vegetarian, which is not true. But they said India is a model for the rest of the world to follow. They said, like exactly what Meet was saying. They said, you're already eating almost vegan diet. You're already eating an almost plant-based diet. So, just a little more and you can, be the model for the rest of the world. But we also are a model for anemia. We're also a model for extreme stunting. We're also a model for women dying, for children dying. And we have, when people are promoting veganism, it doesn't come only from an ethical perspective. There is a huge corporate agenda behind it, and we can't pretend not to see it. Because what is the replacement? Now, if you want to say that India has to go vegan, it's not only idli and sambar without ghee and butter. It's also promoting, like almond milk, and you're promoting cashew nuts, and you're promoting tofu. Like, why would you give tofu to someone in Raichur, in a district in Karnataka, and ask them to eat tofu? So basically, it's the ethics of it. You're talking to a population that is extremely malnourished, and you're saying, okay, it's good, it's excellent that you're malnourished. You could try a little more, and then you'd be doing something very ethical, or you'd be doing something very moral. And the Eat Lancet Commission, they made statements like you should target adolescents, you should start small, and uh, I mean, they used a whole language which is very problematic. And we're seeing that what happens to children. You have children who are culturally used to eating certain foods, who enjoy eating certain foods, and they are being indoctrinated right from the word go. Like, we have Akshay Patra, which is, initiative of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which is open about saying that they believe in the caste system. They believe in some demonic caste, and then they believe in some spiritual caste. They say sattvic food is a higher form of living. They say children in schools are not able to concentrate because they have lustful thoughts from eating animal source foods, from eating meat. Children are consistently told that this food is not good for you. It's being told by your academicians, being told by your researchers, by your teachers, by your peers, by your even parents start talking that language. So that doesn't come from a scientific basis. It comes purely from an ideological or propaganda basis. Like, what are you doing to the children? Children are refusing to eat foods that they're traditionally used to. And this idea of not giving eggs in the midday meal. So first of all, you bring in a cattle slaughter ban, you break an economy, you break the nutrition of, thousands of people eat livestock-based food. You have only an ideological reason to bring in a law to prevent people from, you criminalize what has been essentially an economic and a nutritional source for a lot of people. And then then meat eaters generally are criminalized. Like, why are offices and large institutions saying that we are vegetarian? It's because you're looking down on animal source foods. You're sending out a message that we are a minority. We don't like the sight. We don't like the talk. We don't like the thought of meat. So therefore, the rest of you, like the 90% of you, have to give up your eating practices. And now with eggs, there's so much of politics around eggs. So on the one hand, you have the science of it. On the one hand, you have the need for it. You have the nutrition indicators in the country. On the other hand, you have this propaganda and you have this ideology. So yeah, that's all I have.
So, Anindya, if you look at meat, the practice of eating meat, or the way meat is projected, somehow you find that, a section, especially the dominant section, always links that with alcohol for some reason. I just, it's a very funny thing, Or, if you now look at the latest law in UP, in certain places, they are banning meat and alcohol. I mean, one meat, of course, we are talking about it, but then this kind of a lumping it with something to give it that, I mean, how do you see it, as a...
I think that one of the big problem here is that we associate morality and ethics with it. And the ethics is actually the ethics of a minority who rule. That's the reality. Now, I understand that Meet is coming from a passionate and position where from his love for animals. But ideas of cruelty are actually cultural ideas. They're not absolute ideas. They change from one society to another, and they cannot be absolute. For instance, let me take the case of PETA. Right? PETA has a 99% euthanasia rate for dogs and cats in its shelters in the US. Right? And that is ethical for PETA because it believes that euthanasia is an ethical way of treating animals who cannot be adopted. But in various interviews, PETA has actually made it accepted that they exterminate or kill animals who might be adopted, dogs and cats, because they don't have space in their animal shelters. The adoption rate is 2.5% for dogs and 0.4% for cats. This is old data. Maybe it has improved. This is 2017-18 data. Maybe it has improved. But ideologically, PETA believes that euthanasia is an ethical practice. For me, who's a meat eater, for me, the idea that a dog or a cat, I don't know whether the dog or a cat went to PETA animal shelter saying that I want to die, please kill me. Right? So I'm not questioning PETA. I think PETA is a wonderful thing. It cares about animals. It has its validity, space. I'm saying that when PETA says that others are cruel, right? Even with its full, as Meet said, that we do not believe in violence, we believe in, what it is essentially doing is that it's creating a violence of language. So that violence of language, when it is backed by the state, it creates an atmosphere in which a certain group of people rule, right? Let us say, I mean, I'm not going to go into what Dr. Karpagam has already said, that there is a very clear agenda. PETA is not part of that agenda, but I'm saying that wherever there is a thing, they are pushed by big agricultural companies. We know how soybean is produced in Brazil, right? In pitiable conditions, right? So when we talk about speciesism, that, the hierarchy of species, that a chicken is as good as a dog, right? But so is a potato. So is a potato, so is an onion. There is evidence to show that plants do feel and send out defensive signals when they are going to be uprooted, or when a fruit is going to be picked, or a vegetable is going to be picked, right? There is a defense. So you can say, when you kill an animal, it's dead forever, right?
Right.
But a plant is not. But who told you that a plant wants its fruit to be picked and eaten by you? Who told you that soybean wants to be grown and its population multiplied? The only argument there is the difference between sentient, right? So they say, so an animal rights activist will say, animals are thinking beings, they're feeling beings, right?
Yep.
But who told you that you have the right to kill a potato or an onion or an uproot a root? Who told you that? The idea that just because something does not think or feel pain is not a real thing. It's a signal by the brain to your body to react to certain things that are happening to your body. It's a defense system. In plants, the defense system is to release a certain smell. There is evidence now that there are certain kinds of plants which actually send signals out to other, including animals, to come and protect them when a predator attacks them, right? Just because that what we think is thinking is something that allows us to differentiate between thinking and non-thinking, I would say is a type of racism. Just as speciesism is a type of racism, the distinction between thinking, non-thinking is a type of racism, right? So I can extend that to continuously, ad infinitum, and say eating is a kind of racism. So I'm saying that there is a, as long as it is your choice and your belief, right? Which is what Meet is saying, that it is my choice, my belief. I'm not pushing it on anyone. Yes, I might canvas for it, which is a fair thing. I mean, if I believe something, I might want others to also follow it. But when you take states and governments and you involve incentives and things like that, it is your choice which is being pushed by the state. Let us be very clear. It is a violence of the law. It is a violence of language. It's an ideological violence. Whether that violence you cannot control when it becomes physical violence.
So, Meet, does this trouble you that somewhere your view is getting kind of in a situation like ours today in India? PETA is it comes from a different background. It has a different history. You have a different view, but is it fear? I mean, do you fear that somewhere your stand and your point is getting lost because of this kind of a politics that's kind of pushing people to do things which, against their wishes? I mean,
see, firstly, I would like to respond to what Mr. Anindya said about certain things. One being, he spoke about euthanasia. So all this data has been put up by a lobby of companies that are into slaughtering of animals in the US. And they also run a website called petakills.com. And if you really want to check the factness of the data that they have put out, you need to check petasaves.com, where we have put out all the data regarding when and what is the policy of PETA as far as euthanasia is concerned. We may talk about morals, whether it's acceptable or not acceptable euthanasia. It's a very controversial and a very sensitive topic, even in a country like India, because there are not many people who agree or who are okay with animals being euthanized, howsoever the animal might be suffering. But the legal position as far as euthanasia is concerned, that it is a decision that a veterinarian has to make. It is not a decision that I can make or PETA can make. It is a decision only a veterinarian can make, whether a particular animal, considering his or her condition in which he or she has been presented to the veterinarian, is in a condition to be treated or is beyond, is beyond what can be treated. So in that situation, and these are extreme cases, these are not cases where you just euthanize an animal for no reason. I
think your point is well taken, about euthanasia. Yeah. But what about this larger point?
No, I just want to quickly respond here. This is I'm not quoting from any anti-PETA organization. This is PETA has admitted itself in interviews that it has a 99% euthanasia rate, higher than what the US government's own shelters have. So this is actually being reported by New York Times, by Atlantic, by New Yorker Magazine. These are not groups which have also actually done many pro-PETA arguments as well. And I'm not questioning that. I'm saying that PETA accepts euthanasia as a kind system. Many people will not accept it as kindness. I'm just pointing out that what is kind and what is ethical is a social thing.
Let's move beyond this. My point to you originally was that whatever view you had, is it now getting lost because of the larger politics?
See, the thing about the thing in India is that dairy is promoted a lot. So it's nowhere something that PETA promotes, right? Meaning,
sorry to interrupt you, but not about PETA. But I'm talking about the state policy about the pushing, say, people who eat meat on the edge. Is it somewhere conflicting with your own?
I can't really speak for the state, meaning how can I speak for something that
from
the
as a
state is
PETA
doing?
representative?
Yeah.
Is it somewhere polluting your views? Because this is getting mixed up with that.
Not really, because our stand has been very clear and consistent that violence or forcing somebody to do something is not the solution. It has to come from within. And like I said before, I can only make an appeal. Like there are people who make several kinds of appeal about the things that they wish or do not wish to do.
Right.
Similarly, in a democratic country, what the purpose of this organization, why it was started, is for protection and well-being of all animals, not just dogs, cats, or domesticated animals. So we are just putting out what we as an organization would like the people to know and then do depending on what they think or do not think of it. So I don't think, we
got it. I get it. Basically, you're saying it should be voluntary and you're opposed to this kind of forcible thing. But Mr. Hashmi, this issue about Dr. Karpagam, just one, Mr. Hashmi, this point about, this view on food and, if you look at it from a cultural point of view, you also said that it's a kind of a targeting communities, but is it about food at all in the first place? I mean, you think is it about meat eating itself, or is there something larger, to this? I mean, is there a larger point to this?
No, there is a larger point to it. Any stick is good to beat Jack with. So whatever stick you get, and you see how it operates. After the ban on cattle slaughter in different states, you know who are the worst sufferers? The leather workers. Tanneries have shut down. Tens of thousands of people have lost their jobs. And what were the cattle they were skinning? People were lynched for skinning dead cattle. And all those hides that went into shoemaking, now nobody touches them. They are rotting. And this is happening all over. Major tanneries have shut down. Whatever leather work existed in Kanpur is done, finished. Hides are now being transported from different parts of the country to Chennai. And the leather industry has suffered nominally, and we earned huge amounts of money by exporting leather goods. All that is gone. The kind of damage stray cattle are causing to agriculture, to small peasants, all and to what purpose? And as Anandya was saying, who are you to decide, or what Dr. Karpagam had said? Who are you to tell us what to eat and what not to eat?
Yeah.
But there is an entire politics behind it.
Right. Actually, we have a few questions from the viewers.
Sorry, can I just make one point?
Yeah, this question is also for you, but anyway, please.
Yeah. No, so what I'm saying is this idea of euthanasia. You have animals in a closed shelter, and then you have a group of people like veterinarians taking a call about which animal can be killed. That's precisely what is happening in terms of livestock. You will never have a farmer selling a completely productive livestock for what you're calling euthanasia. And the idea of euthanasia is you kill the animal, but in Indian context, you have people eating that. You have an entire economy dependent on that. So if you're killing it in a closed shelter and then you bury the animal, it's somehow more moral. But if you kill it and people consume it, then it's less moral. So, there is a conflict in PETA's position itself, because farmer after farmer tells us that we only sell our livestock when they're sick, when they're completely, they're struggling. They showed us animals which are not able to move, which are not able to walk, which are not able to eat, which have, some reason for which the animal is not at all productive. The animal is in pain. And they say those are the animals we sell, and we sell them in the cattle market. We would never sell animals that are productive. So then PETA needs to look at that, like if you're okay to euthanize animals, in a shelter, then why would you have a problem with farmers deciding, or with the help of a veterinarian, when livestock is not productive and should be killed and consumed?
Okay, so Dr. Karpagam, there are a lot of questions now. What I'll do is I'll just take a very short break for one more round of that short promo, and then we'll continue. So, welcome back. Dr. Karpadam, there are a few questions which have come. This one is for you. Basically, it's a little long. Arnab Parimu is a person who's asked this question. Do you agree that poor suffer from protein deficiency? Vegetarianism might have got politicized in recent times, but culturally, many people prefer vegetarian food. There is not enough information available to suggest what a vegetarian should do to increase his or her protein intake. While often I hear arguments in favor of meat eating, why experts shy away to address this question? Won't that give your arguments more credibility? That's the question.
To be honest, I think most of the experts talk mainly about vegetarianism. So there's no dearth of advice on vegetarianism. In fact, all the policies also mainly promoting vegetarianism. So for example, if you go to a state government office, they say, do you have anemia? Eat iron tablets and eat, green leafy vegetables. You'll never in any health information leaflet hear about organ meats, which are the largest source of iron. That's science. I mean, that's the nutritional science. And I think your point is well taken. Vegetarians in India are people who also consume dairy. So if you look at food groups, you have the cereals, millets, you have pulses, legumes, you have fats and oils, you also have vegetables and fruits, then you have dairy, and then you have meat and poultry and fish. So basically, your food should come from all of these food groups. So you should have a diversity, and the protein to, the cereal millets to the legume pulses ratio should be in the ratio of 3:1. So if you consume in that ratio, basically a lot of your nutritional needs, one will balance the other. And on top of that, if you add butter or ghee, they actually, fat is an important source of energy, and for especially for children, you have to add butter or ghee. And it also helps in the absorption of vitamin A, D, E, and K, which are fat soluble vitamins. And you also have milk or dairy. So if you have that in large quantities, then you can basically have a pretty balanced diet.
I see. Okay. And there's one more question. This one is from Puneet. What are your key takeaways from the impact that cow slaughter ban has had both economically and socially, and the dangers of viewing the ban purely through the prism of religion?
Is this for me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically in Karnataka, in a great rush, the government came and imposed a cattle slaughter ban. And now, like the last 2 months, we've spoken to a lot of people who have been involved around this cattle, economically. So the farmers have had huge problems. The farmers are not able to sell their livestock, and they're not able to maintain them. For example, the imported cattle, they say is very difficult to maintain them. And their question is, okay, if you're worshipping the cow, why don't you just worship the indigenous cow? And that anyway, it's left out of this whole equation. But this cattle slaughter ban has actually now come on the bulls, bullocks, on the oxen. And in fact, they've brought in restriction on buffaloes as well. And the entire system, we have people who are transporting these cattle, after they've been bought, mainly Muslim or Dalit communities who are being targeted by these self-appointed Gaurakshaks in collaboration with the police. There's basically a lot of extortion that's happening. They're extorted for money. There's a lot of violence. The cattle gets seized, and then they don't know where it goes. Then we have the butchers who are facing a huge problem. And as the other speaker said, the people who are dependent on it. So you have the people who are working with leather, with hides, with the curing units, the people in the slaughterhouses. A lot of this byproducts from livestock actually go into the pharma company. You need bones to make your sugar. There's a whole bunch. So all of them have been affected in several ways. So it's that's the impact. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so fairly This one, there's one more question from Anjana Sharma for Azhar, Meet Azhar. While animals don't want to die, do you make a distinction between red animals and wild animals? While the latter have a well-defined food chain, how could one control the rapid growth of milk and egg-providing animals and birds without killing them? Is it your perception that you should go vegan? What happens to the much touted diversity debate?
So basically, more than 90% of the current population of livestock that we have, whether it is poultry or other livestock, as such as goats, sheep, and cattle, more than 90% of them have been kind of brought into existence through either artificial insemination or genetic modification, etc. Because if you see the number of if say, for example, a hen were laying X amount of eggs in a particular year, in today's day and age, with all sorts of modern science and technology and artificial insemination and genetic modification and all that, a hen produces about 360 eggs in a year, which is not natural at all. So it is we who have induced this. It is not natural. It is not nature that they have multiplied. Even if you see cattle production, use of artificial insemination is so prevalent. Even before the dry period of a cattle gets over, the cattle is again artificially impregnated. So that, in a year, there are maximum baby calves that can be born so that the milk production is continuous. So it is we who have, started this entire process, and we are the ones who are accelerating the growth. It's not the growth that is happening on its own. So wild animals kill other animals, other herbivores or other animals in wild for their own need. And it's not for, when they kill those animals instantly. And that is how that animal is made. A particular tiger or a lion or a leopard or other carnivorous animals kill for survival. Here, what we are doing is not for survival, because we have a large variety of options available. At least that is what I would say, and I would believe that we have so many options. We need not necessarily eat meat to survive. I have not eaten meat since I was born. I have not consumed dairy in 6.5 years. I'm not dead. I'm not suffering from any deficiency. So that's what I would like to say.
Okay. This, there's a corollary to that question from K. Subramaniam.
Yes.
He's asking you, are you against, this goes for eggs, are you against eggs because an egg doesn't feel and doesn't run away if you try to break it? So why would vegans oppose eating eggs?
Eggs are basically periods of a hen. And if you see the kind of conditions in which hens are raised, they are kept in battery cages, which are even smaller than a size of an A4 sheet paper. And by the way, just informing everyone and the viewers that battery cages, by the order of the Honorable Delhi High Court, have been asked to be phased out. By now, they should have been phased out. But none of the states have even started phasing out battery cages, which the court has held to be illegal and cruel and in violation of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. So while these practices continue, this is why eating eggs is a problem, because for the production of eggs, it's these hens or these chickens, whatever you want to call them, that are being subjected to this kind of cruelty and abuse. They are literally relegated to a cage which is smaller than the size of an A4 sheet paper. And they are also artificially inseminated. There is no natural mating that happens. So it is extremely painful and cruel. And hence, that is why it's a problem to eat eggs.
Okay.
Sorry, can I please,
Can
I please say something about that?
Sure.
So I think PETA has this thing that they'll pick the most exploitative, the worst practices, and they'll say, use that as an example. If you go to an Indian village, you'll see poultry running around, you'll see the eggs being laid, you'll see the livestock. It's a part of the, day-to-day existential, the routine of a village. And you take some extreme examples, you take some extremely disturbing videos. It's very untrue to say that all the chickens are raised in battery cages and that they're being tortured. A majority of India livestock is the pastoral community looks after them. There's a community that actually takes the livestock out grazing. In fact, the Indian beef is preferred in a lot of countries because there is not this whole artificial feeding. They're not force fed. They're allowed to walk around. Therefore, the meat is much more, what they call lean meat. The amount of fat content is much less. So then, if you want to bring in an argument, then you need to bring in based on facts. You can't just sensationalize the whole thing, and you can't just make it like there's some disaster that's waiting to happen, because it's veganism comes with its own abuses. Like a vegan diet, first of all, it's nutritionally deficient unless you have additional supplements. Where's your B12 going to come from? You have to take it from a company. And all Indians are not going to be able to buy the kind of expensive supplements that vegans consume, but they never talk about that. And it's how we've evolved. We've evolved to where we are by eating animal source foods. So when we say that for ethical reasons you should give up eating animal source foods, you also need to have the conversation on the nutritional aspect of it. Is that what you want the entire population of the world to go malnourished because the PETA activists are feeling morally outraged? They need to have those conversations, and they can't have those conversations by pretending that a vegan diet is nutritionally adequate. It is not.
Yeah. You wanted to respond to that? You wanted to say something?
Yeah, unfortunately, I am not a nutritionist, so I cannot respond to that. It will not be appropriate for me to say something when I don't have the educational qualification or the experience of saying that. But we do have a vegan nutritionist at PETA who helps address all these concerns. And if I knew that this was something that was going to be discussed, I would have had her join instead of me. So, she could have addressed these concerns. But anyway, about what I can respond is the amount of consumption that we have of eggs or dairy in our country. Majority of it is produced in industries or in factory farms, not in villages. And even if I were to say, okay, whatever you are saying about villages, about hens roaming, etc., when hens lay eggs, a lot of times hens destroy those eggs and eat them up because the shell of the egg is made up of calcium. So if the hen herself is feeling low on calcium, she will destroy that egg and consume it. But we won't allow that to happen because we want that egg to be sold. So even somebody in a village who might be allowing the hen free movement, etc., is after all going to do what is beneficial for him to make profits, because he's raising that hen or those poultry animals for money. And when you say about cattle roaming and or going for pasture feeding, etc., that is only in rural areas. Majority of the production of milk is not from rural areas, but it is from proper factory farms, from companies where cattle are raised. There are videos, evidence available to show how they are kept. There are no babies seen in all these dairies, in all these factory farms where cows are raised for milk. So where are the babies? If the baby is not there, then how is the milk there? And then where has the baby gone? If the cow is lactating, which means she has given a baby, that's why she is lactating like any other mammal. So these are questions also which we need to answer. It's not about convenience. It's about the harsh fact. And when in today's day and age, consumerism and industrialization is increasing, industries are the ones which are producing majority of our needs today. So how can we deny the cruelty that is being, that these animals are subjected to?
Okay, that's you made a point. Mr. Hashmi, this question is for you. I accept your argument that government should not be in the business of telling anybody what to eat or otherwise. But by suggesting that some animals get to eat only this or that, are you not trying to tell animals what they should eat? Leave it to their choice, won't you? I mean,
when did I suggest?
It's a kind of a question. Even I'm wondering, when you said that.
No. So I didn't suggest that. So this question doesn't make sense to me.
Sense at all. Actually, you're right. Actually, yeah. Because even I don't recollect. I don't know how.
I didn't suggest that you force feed animals.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm against preventing people from eating what they don't want to eat.
Yeah.
And similarly, I'm against forcing animals to eat what they don't want to eat.
That's true. There's another question for Mr. Meat. Does PETA not extensively lobby to push its agenda also?
Sorry, in what way? Because I don't see anything that we have suggested. Rather, if you were to see data about artificial insemination just in the budget in 2019, if I'm not wrong, the budget allocation for artificial insemination, which PETA is against, and we have several videos on artificial insemination, the government has rather increased artificial insemination to what they say is 80% coverage of livestock. That is not something that PETA promotes or is in for. Rather, we strongly stand against it. So I don't see how we are trying to push an agenda and the government is accepting it. Not at all.
Yeah. This point, this is for all of you. This is from one of our readers, Vandana Rathore. She's asking, getting our fellow citizens killed by pushing this debate of veg, non-veg, is being inhuman to humanity? Really, that's the point of this of this discussion. Actually, freedom of will to eat X food must rise above politics, and this should be our understanding. And so this is really the point. See, one of the risks of this debate is getting into vegetarianism versus non-vegetarianism. But really, the point of the debate is which is what Vandana is asking. Can it become inhuman, in this move? What do you say, Anindyo? And even the others can respond after that. Yeah.
So as I said, that I think that the point is essentially, right, as I said right at the beginning, I think there is a distinction to be made between eating more vegetables, and I actually agree oddly with both Dr. Karpagam and meat, because if I look at in India rural areas, then I think that what Dr. Karpagam is saying is absolutely correct, that it is not industrially produced. What Meat is saying, that if you wanted to increase the consumption of meats and eggs, then maybe you'll have to end up doing industrial production, which would be a problem because that is crude. My point is very simple, that in a lot of the problems that we have in terms of global hunger has a lot to do with excessive meat consumption in the West. There's no doubt about it. 1/3 of grain being produced in the world is used for consumption by livestock, right?
Sorry, Anindya, yeah. I'm just going to interrupt. I'm sorry, but we are talking about the politics of it.
So that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that the politics, when we talk about where I differ with meat, is that in a country like India, right, when we try to push things which are relevant for the West, and maybe relevant for upper middle class affluent people in India who eat a lot of meat, have a huge amount of meat consumption, maybe relevant for me, right? When we try to impose that and say that this is relevant for all of India, right, that is a political problem, especially in a space where the minority elite, current elite, the new elite's view about food, the new elite's view about what the rest of India should do, right, is being imposed on the rest of India. It's a view coming from Delhi and North India, which is being pushed across India. I think inadvertently Meat pointed out a certain thing where he said that for South Indians, right, veganism is almost a part of it. He said that they eat idli dosa. This is actually absolutely incorrect. Idli dosa is not the staple food of South Indians, because first of all, there is nothing called South Indian, right? But this is our perception. We have this perception. In fact, when we look at meat-eating people, the maximum are in Kerala, a significant amount in Tamil Nadu, When we go to the east, we have that as well. So there is no such thing called the South Indians traditionally eating vegan food. So this is essentially, unfortunately, I mean, I can sense that meat has a certain degree of, and I actually completely respect it, the love for animals. Whether I disagree with it is not relevant, right? But when inadvertently, this is a time, my appeal to meat or better would be to postpone their campaign right now, because their campaign is being used politically for completely different purposes from what they believe. Because vegans don't want milk to be produced, but that part is not pushed by those who want to put vegetarianism, right? What is pushed is a very typical upper caste view of food habits, and North Indian upper caste view of food habits, of Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Haryana view of food habits, which is being pushed and being talked about and being said that this is what is good. And it is completely a political issue right now.
Yeah.
And therefore, to depoliticize it, there is, my appeal would be, again, this is an appeal, just as meat's appeal is an appeal to people. My appeal is that put it on the back burner right now, because you're being used by people who do not have any love for animals or do not have love for human beings. Right?
Yeah. Before I come to you, Meet, what is your take on this, Mr. Hashmi?
No, see, certainly this, as I said in my opening comment, that it is finally a question of democracy. And we have all kinds of governments all over the world, how state operates and all that. But with all its inadequacies, we have found that democracy is better than all the others. And this is a system that is far more humane than other systems. Now, if by pushing on people a specific kind of food, you are going towards an undemocratic functioning, you are being authoritative, you are being authoritarian, you are being dictatorial. And all of these things are against humans, because they are against the interests of the overwhelming majority of people. So in as much as this is true, this is an absolutely inhuman thing to do, to force people into one kind of dietary preference or another kind of dietary preference.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Karpagam, how would you see this?
Since PETA is specifically here, what I want to say is that veganism comes with its own cost, whether it's nutritional or environmental or social. And we can't, wish that away or pretend that it doesn't exist. Like nutritionally, I also already mentioned, but we also, like, for example, when in the West, the veganism started becoming a trend, there was a huge demand for almonds and cashew nuts, and most of it went from a few of the poorer countries. And the women have been like exploited, young girls, women who are mainly working in this. The cashew nut has something called anacardic acid or cardol. So when you're, peeling those cashew nuts, it releases those acids, and they have burns on their hands. So you're feeling that you're doing something very ethical for the environment. You're having food shipped from across the world. You're having food flown in from across the world. And ironically, because of malnutrition in India, we are having premixes flown in from 5 European countries at the cost. I mean, the budget was some 3,000 crores that the Indian government had set up to fly premixes from those countries to India. And then you'll fortify the cereals and millets, and then you'll feed it to our people here. And veganism is being promoted mainly through soya and corn-based foods. Now, soya is allergenic, it's goitrogenic, it's not as digestible as as people think. It's not bioavailable. It has a very high percentage of protein, but most of it is not bioavailable. You cannot go and pluck a soya bean and just bite it and eat it. It has to go through a huge processing, system of processing. It's not the best food. So you cannot promote soya and say, oh, you give up all your animal source foods and you eat soya. It doesn't work that way. So then, because of the nutritional deficiencies, then the people are being forced to bring in food from outside, and the corporates are saying, we'll give you plant-based meats, we'll give you, cheap foods, we'll put additives. Look at the number of additives and chemicals in all of these foods. Why is there so much obesity in the West? Because it's so much of trans fats, it's so much of processing, so much of additives. And we just, with the sweeping statement, we say, oh, India, with the, battery fed eggs and poultry, and we just dismiss it. On the one hand, you're destroying the livelihoods of thousands and thousands of people. On the other hand, we have sustainable systems. We have our own food sovereignty. You want to break that. So these are all ethical questions, and these are, of course, politically charged issues. You talk about beef, then you'll have some group of Gaurakshaks who will come and beat you up. I mean, it's that politically charged. So at the end of the day, we all have to take a call. Like, what is it we want? Do we want science? Do we want ethics? Do we want like rational, or do we just want to go by, ideology and propaganda? On the one hand, you have the caste-based propaganda. On the other hand, you have the PETA kind of propaganda. They're still all propaganda.
Dr. Karpagam, we'll just give Meet the last word. We just have a couple of minutes before we close. Yeah.
So the Brobka tribe from North India, since thousands of years ago, they were the first vegans in India. And vegan is not a Western concept at all, because vegetarianism was something that India taught to the world. And like I just mentioned about the Brobka tribe from North India, they were vegan, the first vegans in India thousands of years ago. So it's not a Western concept. We are not asking anyone to consume almond milk or cashew milk or anything. It's simply a matter of alternatives available, that these alternatives are available for people who are finding it difficult to make the switch. For me, personally speaking, I would not say that everybody needs to have almond milk or soya milk. It depends on what they eat every day. It depends on what they like. It's about their liking. It's not about, I would personally not be having vegan ice cream. But if somebody asks me that, okay, I'm unable to convert to veganism only because I'm stuck with the ice cream, well, you have vegan ice cream available. That's what I would say. I'm not propagating some company or some brand saying, oh, you have to go and buy this vegan ice cream and, this is the only brand. Nothing like that. We are not encouraging or promoting any brands. Rather, almond milk or soy milk, I have personally made at home whenever I had to make kheer or something. So it's not that I have to go to a corporate and buy a Tetra pack of almond milk. Only then I can consume almond milk. Not at all. Just the almonds which are being produced by farmers. I am buying almonds, making almond milk at home.
Yeah,
so
thank you. Meet, I think your point, Dr. Karpagam, your point as well. But overall, I feel that probably the people, the meat eaters, who I think as a lobby, if you take them, they probably need to push their point of view a little more harder probably, in the current kind of a situation. But then the skewing everything is the politics which you have been talking about. And then, of course, I also agree that one cannot have this debate without also talking about the pros and cons of the veg and non-veg, or the meat eating and meat eating advantages and disadvantages. So, well, but then I think we had a fairly comprehensive discussion. Thank you all so much, Anindyo, Meet, so Mr. Hashmi and Dr. Karpagam. Thank you all so much for making it and taking part in this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.